So you've been crying out to the Lord, where's my babe, where's my husband, where's my wife? And the whole time he's protecting you because who he has for you is not there yet. And he's protecting you from getting experiences with people who are not going to be your spouse that could cause you to have issues in your marriage. And we're telling you, it's better to be content and stay single. It's better to be content and not have sex before marriage. What's up, fam? Welcome back to our channel. My name is Tim. This is my beautiful wife, Pauline, and you're tuning in to another episode of the W Podcast where you get wisdom in the word with the
Wheeler.
Hey, so we are so excited this week. Somebody may or may not have copied the other person when getting dressed today.
You got this first.
The funny thing is, I promise you I did not know what shirt you were wearing.
You weren't paying attention because I was dressed at least an hour before you.
Okay, I don't know about that. But were you mad when you saw what I was wearing?
Mad.
Were you blown?
I saw like, oh cute, I inspired him.
Wow, inspired is crazy.
Why is that crazy?
Are you the
It's not even, just so you guys, it's not the, they're probably like, what are you guys talking about? It's not the exact same sweatshirt or outfit. It's just similar. Because different colors, different styles. You have a hoodie, I have a crew neck, so it's not exactly the same.
So, are you the type of person that likes, like, when you see other couples out matching, is that like, are you like, oh, that's so cute, or are you like, that ain't it?
Depends.
It depends.
If I saw another couple like us, like a family, parents with little kids.
I said couple, I didn't say nothing about little kids.
Okay, I said it depends. Can't the husband and wife be a couple along with the kids as well? It would be impressive to me in that situation because I know how hard it is to get out of the house. Or I would probably think like, oh, she picked out everybody's outfits and she just thought, oh, more of this, and we just grab him something similar. And you know, some husbands are like that. They don't even know what they're wearing in the house. They just put on whatever their wife lays out for them.
Yeah, everybody's different. So
yeah, you don't like matching couples, right?
I mean, I don't really care what other people do, but it's not my preference. For me personally,
when extreme on us, I don't care what people do.
Like, I didn't mean that in a mean way. Just like, I'm not sitting around like, oh, what are they doing? But we got an interesting topic today. Thank you for listening to our little banter in the beginning. But we have a question that somebody submitted to us, and it's something that I wish everybody didn't have to go through. At least in the church. Like, I wish you didn't have to ask the question. But it's 2024, so you gotta ask it. So what is the question? They wanna know.
Okay. How and when should you tell someone you're dating that you're abstaining from sex until marriage? Why do you wish people didn't have to talk about that?
I wish it was.
You wish everyone was perfect and just didn't need to have conversations.
No, it has nothing to do with wishing everybody was perfect. I wish it was a standard that if you meet somebody in church, you're both not having sex before marriage. And obviously I know that that's pie in the sky. I'm just saying I wish that was what it was like.
I mean, even there are people who aren't Christians who abstain from sex.
That's cool. I ain't talking about them.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people in church.
So I'm saying the conversation is necessary outside of the church as well.
Sure. I'm not talking about them though. I'm talking about people that say they live for Christ. I just wish that's just me. I just wish it wasn't needed. But it is. So
yeah, I guess I'm saying I just don't agree that
how you gonna say you don't agree? This is my personal preference.
I know, okay, you're right. It's not that I don't agree. I just think it's just a little bit something to challenge there because I think it's very similar. Take the spiritual component out of it. If you are not a Christian, you could look at it the same way as you do like a dietary preference. Like, okay, I don't eat meat. And it's like, oh, I wish everybody did what I did, or I wish that I didn't have to tell people this. I wish it was a standard that everybody didn't eat meat, but it's not. And that's not fair to, I guess, hold your standards. But I guess you're saying that's not a spiritual component, so it doesn't really matter. But you're just saying, as a Christian, you wish that all Christians had that standard and upheld it. I think a lot of people say that they're abstaining or like they're trying to abstain, but they're not actually abstaining.
So in the Bible, when Paul said, I wish you all were single like me, you'd be like, no, Paul, you're an idiot. You're wrong.
First of all.
Is that what you was saying? I'm just curious.
Nobody.
I'm just
nobody was talking about that.
I was not expecting you to.
I just don't think it's fair to say like, oh, I wish people didn't have to talk about this. You have to talk about it. How else? Like,
I don't think it's fair to say. I don't think it's fair that you are saying it's not fair to say. Anyway, obviously I understand and I get and I want you to have this conversation. I was trying to just have my own thoughts, but
good.
my wife was not trying to let me do that tonight. So that's
cool.
Cool.
I wasn't stopping you. I just was responding.
Yeah. So, how and when should you tell someone you're dating that you're abstaining from sex until marriage? Since you got so much to say today, I would love for you.
Don't.
I would love for you to go first.
I just wanted
No. I would just.
What you have to say.
I would love for you to go first.
No,
seriously,
please.
I'm not going. Please go. Please. Please go. No, just go.
Woo. Okay. Maybe I don't really feel prepared. Even though I did write something down that says you usually go first. But I guess if I was in the situation where I felt it was necessary, because you even asked like, oh, did we have this conversation? And we don't really remember it being this black and white of like, oh, we need to have this conversation, just so you know we're not.
Yeah,
like, I'm abstaining.
I think you said you think it was understood, and I agree that we probably did that. Now, I'm not saying that is best practice. We were fortunate enough to be around each other a lot before we started dating and know each other a little bit, that I was pretty confident that that's who she was, and I'm guessing she felt the same way about me. But I understand a lot of people aren't going to have our situation where they literally worked at the same job, went to the same church as the person, and by no means were we best friends before we started dating, but we did have some familiarity. So I get that it's different, is all I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah, I think that when our sticking point was at kissing, and I think that, we
did talk about that.
Yeah, I think
so. Maybe we did talk about sex.
We talked about boundaries in general. It wasn't. I don't think it's as specific as sex, because I think it's kind of, are you talking about? Oh yeah, I'm not gonna have sex, but we can do this. Like that's a problem too. So it's more about boundaries in general. Like what are our boundaries? And I think if you start there, instead of just saying, "Are you abstaining from sex?" Like that's very, because someone would say, "Well, what kind of sex?" Or like and then. That's and you're learning about them, but...
I like what you just said. Now, some people are just more direct, and that's fine, be you. But I think just saying, hey, what boundaries do you have when it comes to dating? Or you can just go first and say, here are the boundaries that I have when it comes to dating. And then I feel like that can be a safer way to bring the topic up that may not catch somebody off guard or cause them to be defensive. I just feel like it sets it up for a better conversation than just... you having sex, and it's just like, whoa, like, bro, I just met you.
I mean, I don't think most people talk like that, which is another reason why, people maybe don't have the conversations, because they don't think it's weird to say, like, oh, are you having sex? Are you waiting until marriage or not? Because, your boundaries are going to be different regardless. Like, some people want to hold hands, and some people don't. And there's a whole wide range of just what boundaries could be. So I think it's important. A lot of times people are having these conversations reactively of like, oh, I tried to grab this person's hand and they pulled back, and it's like we're 5 dates in, what's going on?
If somebody has stricter boundaries than you, don't judge them for it, because especially as you're just starting to get to know somebody, you don't know what they've been through. You don't know what may trigger them and cause them to go someplace they don't want to go. So I think we just have to be mindful, because I feel like sometimes when people have strict boundaries, people look at them like, oh, you're legalistic, or oh, you're doing too much. It's like, bro, you don't know what I got going on.
Yeah, so to answer the question, how and when should you tell someone you're dating that you're abstaining from sex until marriage? My quick answer is early and often. Whenever you have a chance to talk about it, I would. It doesn't need to be like, these are my rules for dating me. It's just more about, hey, let me share something with you about me and who I am and just what I've learned about myself and what I need. And, like, for example, how could come up early on a first date would be like, something like, oh yeah, like this is what, this is such a nice place. This is what I like to go out, in these situations, or to get to know people like this, and then kind of sharing, if you are open to sharing, like, what's worked for you in the past and what has, and like, oh, like kind of making a joke out of it, like, oh, one time a guy tried to kiss me on a first date and that was just a big red flag for me, or like,
That does not sound natural at all.
it's an option.
I don't like that you would say that on a first date. Suggest that. Yeah, that's how you. Yeah, that's how you.
What?
That's the energy you gave me in the beginning when I was just sharing my thoughts. And you were like, I don't like it. But I like where you were going, but that example just didn't make sense.
Let me give it an example then.
And also, can you clarify early and often? Like, what does often mean? Like,
so this is what I was trying to give examples. Okay. Early and often, whenever it's a natural opportunity for you. So if early on in the relationship, in the dating experience, you're sharing about, okay, so tell me a little bit about, your dating history or whatever. You can say, like, yeah, this is what happened this is what happened, this is what worked, this is what didn't. I learned that I need XYZ type of boundary from that relationship. Now, obviously, that's not you going into detail about everything that happened, but you can, kind of stay positive and say, yeah, now moving forward, this is what I would like to do. And not making it personal to the person that you're talking to, I think is really big. So not like saying, hey, if you were thinking about kissing me tonight, it's not going to happen because my boundary is on the 4th date that I kiss. Like, that's too direct and too awkward, and you're probably just not going to say it if that's what you're thinking is the only way to do it. I think I'm more talking about in general terms, like, this is what I like, this is what works for me, is this situation and that situation. It's kind of similar to how we talk about, like, kind of marriage when you're in the dating situation, and you're in a dating phase of like, oh, I would like to get married one day. Now that doesn't mean I want to get married to you because I don't know you like that yet. That's putting a lot of pressure on someone saying, like, oh yeah, I want to marry you, and you're 3 days in if you just met them. But just saying, like, yeah, I would love to get married one day, I would love to have kids, I would love to do this, I would love to do that. And that way that person's learning about your desires and your heart without feeling like pressure being added to them. And it's kind of the same way with boundaries. Like, yeah, I would love to wait until marriage to have sex. I would love to wait to my wedding day to have my next kiss. And that way the person knows, like, kind of where you're at, instead of you kind of like shutting them down and feeling like, oh, you don't want to kiss them because there's something wrong with them. It's more about like, hey, this is a desire that I have. And then also explain the why. Not just coming across as some religious person saying like, oh yeah, I would like to wait until marriage to have sex because this is what I've learned about sex, this is what I've learned about the Lord, this is what I've learned about myself. Or if you have a past experience that's tied to that, and if you want to share, you can. You obviously don't have to, but you can just say like, yeah, this is what I really want to focus on getting to know the person for who they are and not being distracted by physical kind of engagements or interactions while I'm dating. I think that would be, what would help me get married with the clearest head possible.
What do you think about just asking the other person, what are your thoughts on having sex before marriage? Because I've heard somebody say before that it's better to ask the other person what their view is on it first, because what if you say, and I've heard this more so with women when it comes to men, like saying, hey, what are your views on sex before marriage? Because if you say, hey, I'm not having sex before marriage, maybe the guy will just say that to go along, but then later down the line he's going to try to make a move.
Yeah, so a couple things. I more don't love that option because this question is talking about how do I tell someone, and I get that you're kind of doing, it's not like, it's kind of like a backwards or backdoor way of sharing your boundaries by asking that person first, but like it's kind of like, why are you asking me? Like, I mean, obviously you can be curious just to learn, but I think if your goal walking away from this conversation is like, hey, I want them to know where I stand, because I can't control what another person does or what they want, but I want them to know what my desires are and where I stand and what my boundaries are, because someone could say, oh, I didn't know, because like, I don't like reactive conversations, so I don't want someone to try to touch me or do something and then now I'm like, batting their hand away, or now it's turned into this awkward like, I thought you were cool with this, and it's like, no, you didn't make your kind of intentions or your boundaries known up front. And I think that it would be nice to say that, like, oh, all of us adults state our expectations like proactively, but it's just not true. It just doesn't happen talking about physical boundaries or not, it just doesn't happen in any situation. So I think you need to be prepared for both. You need to have the conversation. That's why I said early and often. Just having the conversation once, early on in your relationship, saying like, hey, I want to wait until marriage to have sex. Like, that's great, do that. But don't think that's going to be the last time you're ever going to talk about it, because that's just not realistic. Because it's like, okay, you don't want to have sex, like vaginal sex, but like, what about this? What about that? And so for me, that falls under the same category as something I want to wait to have until marriage. But not everybody has that understanding of like, okay, well, what do you mean by this or that? And now it's a bigger conversation of like, are you trying to, maintain and pursue purity, or are you just trying to not get in trouble? It's a different conversation. So I don't like doing the backdoor thing in this scenario of like asking what theirs is, because as much as I do care to learn about this person and learn what their boundaries are, at the end of the day, it's not going to change how I feel. Because in the same way, how you said, oh, some guys will kind of change their response depending on what the girl says, some girls will change too. And like, I'm not going to say I all the way did that, but I think because I told you like what I wanted, but in the end, I guess a couple months, weeks later, it was like, okay, yeah, we can kiss now. But I think some people maybe some girls would cower as well, depending on what the guy says, how much they like him, how much they kind of want to be people pleaser. So it's not a surefire way of if your goal is to tell them that what your boundaries are. I think you should just be bold with it.
Yeah, I like what you said about coming or bringing it up as early as possible. I don't think you were saying it has to be the first date, but I do think it needs to be within the first couple. And the reason is because the longer you talk to somebody, it's inevitable that the more you usually are going to like them. And especially if you get into a situation where you start calling each other your official boyfriend, girlfriend, and y'all still haven't had that talk, you're putting yourself up for unnecessary heartbreak. If for whatever reason they disagree with you when it comes to having premarital sex, and then it's either going to be a harder breakup, it's going to be a harder situation that you find yourself in if for some reason y'all get close to engaging in that. And it's just unnecessary if you can have the conversation up front and know where somebody stands, and they know where you stand. So I think that's good. I do want to transition to a different perspective or different question, because I think sometimes we talk about how do you tell somebody you're not having sex, but something else that's important is, especially once you are getting closer to marriage, is talking about what your sex life will look like in marriage. And the only reason I wanted to bring it up because I saw a survey the other day that said married couples in the U.S. report having sex on average about once a week, which is like 54 times a year. Now, some of y'all just dropped your phone and were just like, what? Like, that's crazy. Some of you were like, yo, that's more than I could have ever asked for. So it just depends on where you fall. Some people may be like that. So it just depends on where you fall. I'm curious. I think it's important to. Here's why I bring this up. I know I'm taking a while to get to my thoughts, but I want to make sure I say it correctly. Mm-hmm. The reason this is important to think about before you get married is because I think a lot of people set themselves up for failure when it comes to sex and marriage because they go into it with the wrong expectations. Mm-hmm. Whether that's you want to have it every day, whether it's you want to have it one time a week. It is important once you get engaged, you start having those questions. But I just want to remind everybody that seasons of life come into play when it comes to what an active sex life will look like in marriage. Because if somebody just gave birth, you're not going to be having sex right away, most likely, if you're trying to make sure people heal up and get ready. Or if somebody has a sickness and a diagnosis that is hurting them, or they're just not physically able to be active at that time. Like, you have to have that understanding. Excuse me. And I think it's really important, and why I'm bringing this up, because I see you looking at me like, what are you talking about?
I'm just listening.
I think it's important because I want to highlight why it's so amazing to stay abstinent before you get married and while you're dating somebody, because you're building up that muscle to not have sex, to not need it, the self-control, like Pauline just said. And I think sometimes we overlook that aspect of, well, I'm not having sex just because I want to honor the Lord. And yes, that is amazing, and you should do that. But it also helps train your flesh that it's not in control. It's so that when you get into marriage and you get in a situation where your wife is pregnant and can't have sex, or the husband is physically unable, whatever the situation may be, you're used to not having sex if you cannot do it. Whereas somebody that has trained their flesh before marriage to have sex whenever and however, that's how you get in a situation where you're like, all right, my spouse is not available. I got to fulfill this need outside of my marriage. And really it comes down to, you haven't learned how to be content when it comes to your sexual life, and maybe other areas of your life. But I think contentment is something that's underrated, because I think it's hard for us to say, you know what, I'm content not having sex right now. Even though everyone else in the world seems like they're having sex or seems like they're doing it, I'm content knowing that this is not the season that I'm going to be having sex, and I'm okay with that. And I think it's hard, especially in America, or I know we have people all over the world who listen, but I think it's hard to really understand contentment in 2024, because we can have everything we want even if we can't afford it. It's called a credit card. Like, I can go out and buy my dream life even if my actual bank account doesn't reflect what I should be able to afford. Yeah. That's just something that I heard today, just randomly, the whole contentment and making sure that you are setting yourself up and your life up to learn how to be content and learn how to have self-control. And I just think that that's really important, and it goes into having those expectations going into marriage and just being realistic. Yeah, that's so good. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think it is definitely something that's underrated, because, you know, and I think that even that mindset of contentment can help for those, you know, when I first got saved, everyone was talking about like burning, like, oh, I'm burning. You know, why are they getting married? People don't talk like that no more. They don't. Like, why are you getting married? I why. Say, oh, I'm burning. It's like, oh. People not burning no more? I mean, maybe it's just called something else. That okay. Just but yeah, you don't want to just get married to have sex, because, you know, there are obviously times in marriage where, you know, sex is, I mean, you're not having sex 24 hours a day, so you have to, there's other parts, more important parts of it. But yeah, I think that it is, that contentment will help you get through that time, especially if you were having sex and then you stopped having sex as a single person for the Lord to pursue and maintain, you know, period, to stop sinning. And then you're kind of like, okay, I still have this physical desire. Like, what do I kind of do with this? And like beating your flesh, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of God's presence and filling yourself up with, you know, the things of God after emptying yourself of the things of the world and of sin. So I think that, yeah, that same kind of like mindset and discipline happens, where it's like, hey, the boundary is, I don't have sex outside of marriage. I'm not married right now, so I will not be having sex. And when I am married, I'm only having sex within my marriage with the person that I'm married to. And that boundary essentially doesn't change. Just your status changed from being a single person to being a married person. And I think that, you know, if you have that mindset, like, I'm content, I'm good, like, because of Jesus, not because of this physical desire. Because people talk about, oh, you know, I'm a human, God's made me this way, like, sex is natural, people have been doing it since the beginning of time. All of those things are true, but God made it for a specific context, for marriage. And it's tough when we do live in a society where everything is sexualized, you know, every single kind of form of entertainment, which is why it's challenging. Like, well, why do we call that, you know, entertainment if it's something that's kind of growing and an insatiable desire within you?
it just seems like everybody else is doing it, is having it, and you can kind of feel like, oh, well, when I'm married, I should have access to this all the time. And that's not a heart of service, not a heart of love. That's a heart of lust. It's a heart of greed, of like, you know, you're kind of like my property, you belong to me. I should be able to walk over to the faucet and water comes on whenever I want it to come on. And it's like, that's not what spouse is.
Please don't confuse us. When you get married, we want you to have as much sex as you possibly can. But what we're saying is the two of you have to be in agreement on that and have to be able to do that. And if you're not on the same page about that, we don't want your whole marriage to feel like it's ruined.
Right.
Because of that. Because that's ridiculous. Because you're not going to have sex the majority of your marriage. The majority of your marriage happens outside of the bedroom. So we're trying to make sure that you have healthy expectations that don't affect outside of your bedroom just because your bedroom may not be where you want it to be.
Yeah, and I think an important part too is like thinking, depending on what your relationship history is like, a lot of people have been in relationships before coming to Christ, before honoring God in their love life that was 60-70% sex. And it's hard to, and it's not a matter of like, oh, you know, I'm expecting that in marriage. And like we talked about this years ago with one of our pastors, was like, you know, when you are not in a marriage and you're having sex, you know, you don't have all this like defense, you don't have all these like attacks and these pressures and these resistances on your relationship, because you're not doing things for God. You know, like the enemy's not trying to, you're going in the same way as him, you're kind of helping him along instead of like kind of being an opponent of his. So, you know, if you guys hang out 2-3 times a week, and a lot of those times you're hanging out having sex, and that's like the majority of your time together, essentially you see each other a couple hours, and then if you live together it's kind of different. But I think that can kind of translate of like, okay, yeah, marriage is a magnifier. So if we were together and had sex 2-3 times a week, you know, that's gonna increase even more, you know, while we're married. But you're not adding in all the spiritual elements of it. You're not adding in all of the practical elements of, you know, being married. And that's why it's really important to marry your best friend, somebody who you can go through highs and lows with, not just somebody who's like this great sexual partner, because there's so much more to marriage than sex. That's why it's important about how you date and the type of relationship you have before you get married. I think so many people have all this like dramatic sexual, you know, like, you know, I mean, I say dramatic like a movie type of relationship, you know, having sex before they get married, and then they get into the marriage, and the marriage is like boring to them because it's like, oh, so much humdrum, so many bills, so many like kind of life. Yeah, like adulting stuff. And it seems like, you know, our life was, and then they kind of chase after that drama outside of their marriage by running around and having an office bay or whatever. And because that's what you trained yourself to desire, that's what you trained yourself to, you know, kind of sustain your attention, versus being okay with like hanging out and going to a restaurant and laughing and going home. And like, if that was your life, if like all we did together was just talk and laugh for the rest of our lives, I would be so cool with that. And, you know, if we have great sex here and there, like that's great too. And even if we have bad sex here and there, like whatever, like it's not that big of a deal. But if you are trained, so sometimes that's why it's really good to like, you know, allow the Lord to purge you of your sexual past in your life and all of that, and like have time by yourself. Being single, if you have had like a history of jumping in relationships and having all these different sexual partners, because you need to reset and renew your mind. And the Bible talks about being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Please don't miss that. I have to double down on what you just said, because I don't want people to miss, especially the people who've been crying out to God, Lord, I'm sick of being single. Yeah. Lord, we've had people who've told us like, I've never had a boyfriend, I've never kissed a man, should I be ashamed of it? No. Yeah. Like, the more dating activity you have, the more you're going to have to try to forget when you get married.
Yeah, it's a lot of baggage.
Nothing's worse than being married and you're thinking about old experiences with other people. That's not what you want. So you've been crying out to the Lord, where's my babe, where's my husband, where's my wife? And the whole time he's protecting you, because who he has for you is not there yet, and he's protecting you from getting experiences with people who are not going to be your spouse that could cause you to have issues in your marriage. And we're telling you, it's better to be content and stay single. It's better to be content and not have sex before marriage than to be having sex before marriage, and then you get into marriage and you're like, I wasn't expecting all of this mental drama, mental warfare, emotional warfare, because she don't do it like this other girl used to do it. He don't do it like the way my other guy used to do it. We don't want you to have those problems. And I think people don't think about that other side. The Bible says count the cost. We don't think about what comes with the other side of having fun, quote unquote, and sinning and doing things that the Lord, we don't realize, God actually is smarter than us. Like, there's a reason besides STDs why we shouldn't have sex before marriage. It's like, he knows what he's talking about. And I also understand that that's easier said than done. But that's why I'm grateful that me and you were able to not have sex before marriage, because as hard as I know it can be, I know it's possible. Yeah. And I know that if you want to honor God, you can do it. Yeah. Because the Holy Spirit is going to give you the power. As the word says, he gives us the power to do his will. That's a verse. I would Google that and just repeat that over yourself. Mm-hmm. No, seriously, that's a cheat code to Christian living, is having verses that you can repeat and speak over yourself that can empower you to live for him, because the word is living, it's active. Mm-hmm. And let me look it up really quick, and you feel free to fill the time.
Fill the time. Yeah, I think a couple practical things is, like, I'm sure some of you are, some people are listening like, okay, yeah, like, this sounds good. Like, I've always kind of started off my relationship saying, and maybe telling the person outright, hey, I am abstaining until marriage, and it never really works out. Because I think, any person who loves God, who struggles with that, they start off with good intentions, but the practical stuff is what really holds a lot of people back. So a couple of things that helped us abstain from sex until marriage. And this one I know a lot of people don't like, especially like the older, more independent you are, is not being alone in the house. So, and people, when we talk about that, well, what did you do? How did you hang out? You hang out outside the house.
How did you have a life?
Yeah, how did you date somebody if you're not alone in the house with them, you don't ever go over the house? Well, if you live alone, that's almost never going to happen unless you have, like a party, or you have friends over, like a movie night with friends or whatever. You just have other people come over with your boyfriend or girlfriend. But yeah, it's just they're almost just never going to be in your house. And that's okay, because it's everything that you want to accomplish with them coming over. You want to have a cooking night, guess what? They have cooking classes. If you want to watch a movie, guess what? There's a movie theater. Everything you guys wanted to do, you wanted to talk, there's a bunch of late night, Starbucks, grocery stores with little eateries, restaurants, wherever. There's places,
Walmart, Target.
There's places you can go that are open until midnight, where you guys can talk and laugh and get to know each other and all those different things. Or you can go over to your friend's house, or go over to your parents' house, or brother and sister. I don't know. There's places that you can go and hang out and get to know each other where you're not alone in under a roof. That was a really big savior. Well, Jesus is the only savior, but that was a really good boundary that we had, was not being alone in the house, and then pretty much cover you, probably eliminate 90% of your opportunities to allow something to happen. Because it's not a matter of oh, I love God, you don't love God enough. And it's we're all human, just like we talked to everyone. Anyone in the right environment will mess up. It's just a matter of knowing that you're not that holy, you're not that smart, and anybody can get God, and anybody will get God. But that's how you have to make sure that you don't get God. Don't put yourself in a situation where you can get God. It's not about how holy you are, how saved you are, how much you read your Bible, whatever. It's about, do I make wise decisions? That's what it comes down to. Can I discern if this situation, this environment is going to be good for me or not? So it's going to help me get closer to where I want to be or further away. So that's the big tip that I would give. And or if you don't have a problem with being in the house but alone with someone, if that's not where you've slipped up in the past, just look at wherever you've slipped up in the past with your previous relationships, your previous people, wherever those there's always a pattern. Whenever those situations are, whenever those environments are, don't go to those environments anymore. And you'll probably find yourself in a much better situation.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So Philippians 2:13 says, "For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him." I think so often we get uncomfortable or unsure of how we're going to live for God, and we forget that He's right there with us, helping us.
Lord.
We're not in this alone. We can't do it by ourselves, to be honest. We need His power. So whenever you feel like you can't do something, ask God, "Hey, Lord, give me strength to make it through this. Give me strength to stay abstinent. Give me strength to be content. Give me the power to want." I love that it says giving you the desire. Because some of you right now, like, I don't have a desire to stay abstinent, to be honest. Like, I have a desire to, you know what I'm saying? I have a desire for something else. But the Lord says that He will give you the desire to please Him and the power to do it. So if that's something you want, even if you don't feel it right now, you can go to Him and ask. And He's a generous God that He'll give it to you. Mm-hmm. So this has been another episode of the W Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. See y'all next week.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this video.
To get more Christian relationship advice, subscribe to our channel.
And make sure you check out our other videos as well.